All right, so hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Felicia Fuller, and I'm the Director of Operations here at GBRI. And today's webinar is being brought to you in partnership with the Collaborative for High Performance School, or CHIPS. And today is the last webinar in their series, and we would just like to thank them for this opportunity of offering such amazing webinars to our audience, and we hope that we will be able to do something similar in the very near future. And while we wait for everybody to join, I would just like to do a short introduction for those of you who may not be familiar about GBRI. We are a privately owned online gamified education platform with a mission to make sustainability resources affordable and accessible to everyone across the globe. Located in New York City with a presence around the world, we are a USGPC education partner and AIA education provider. And we also have various other education partners, including the United Nations, CHIPS, and the Rhode Island Energy Efficiency Council. And we believe a truly sustainable future must also be an equitable one, where every human is treated fairly and equally. Our mission is to make sustainability, health, and wellness education available and affordable to everyone around the world. With hundreds of sustainability courses surrounding topics, energy, water, LEED, net zero buildings, green schools, and health and wellness, just to name a few, Learning Hub at GBRI is your one-stop shop for all your sustainability education needs. And we are very excited to be launching our updated WELL version 2 exam prep and mock exams. And we have started our June session just yesterday, actually. And if you're interested in joining this month or upcoming months, there is still time to register. And so for those of you that are interested in either of these, you can reach out to us after today's session. And today's session has been approved for one HSW-LU through AIA. And for those of you that are looking for LEED or WELL credit, you can report 1 general hour for today's session. We will be sharing the information needed to report that credit after today's session. So just keep an eye for the follow-up email that will go out later today. And today's session is being recorded, and so we will share the information needed to review or to watch that recording within 24 hours of today's session. And with that, I would now like to hand things over to our moderator for today's session, Natalie, who is the Impact Coordinator for CHIPS. So Natalie, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much, Felicia. Happy to be here. I'm really excited about this webinar on understanding and selecting healthy materials because we have such a broad spectrum of speakers representing different perspectives. So today we'll have Raja Tanis from Berkeley Analytical giving sort of a technical perspective on healthy materials in terms of lab testing and standards. And then we'll talk with Patty Karapanar, who is an architect, and she'll talk a little more about selecting healthy materials as an architect and why that's important for designers. And then Gretchen Withers from Oregon Door will be talking about why healthy materials are important to manufacturers and why they're investing in healthy products. And last but not least, John Semlin with Tarkat will be talking about the opportunities and challenges for manufacturers in regards to investing in and promoting healthy materials. So we're really excited to be here. And when you have any questions, oh, sorry, next slide. Thanks. For housekeeping, if you have any questions for the panelists, just put those in the Q&A box and I'll be fielding those to the panelists and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. For other chats, like where you're from, wanting to say hi, just go ahead and use the chat box. A reminder that this session is being recorded and this recording and the slides will be available to you after the webinar. And all attendees have been muted just to help with limiting background noise. And when panelists start speaking, I'll ask you to also mute when you're not sharing. Next slide, please. Thank you. And for those of you who don't know who we are, CHIPS is the Collaborative for High Performance Schools. We're a nonprofit collaborative of building health and technical experts dedicated to making our built environment for schools better and healthier. We do that by providing technical resources and building criteria. We have a really large set of criteria for schools that help them meet high performance standards. And we have things like energy and water as credits, sort of like LEED. I'm sure you've heard of LEED. But also we have a big emphasis on student health, and we only verify schools. So we're school specific here at CHIPS. To do the work we do, we rely on membership. So if you are interested in the movement to improve schools, please find us on our website. And sorry, go ahead, next slide. We've had over 700 projects for CHIPS, and CHIPS criteria is used in 14 states and has been adopted as the construction standard in over 60 public school districts. Next slide. And a big thank you to our sponsors. This is the last webinar in the series. And so if you like what you've been seeing and hearing, please reach out to us and we can talk about collaboration for future webinars. Most of the webinars in this series have been more on the technical side of things, although the last one on equity and restorative justice, Craig, the executive director, had pointed out that it's really important that we look at schools in a more holistic way. So today, to me, is sort of a balance between the two. It's a little technical, but it's also really, really focused on student health and well-being. Products are imperative to that. So without further ado, I think the next slide. Oh, and sorry, our learning objectives. We're hoping that after this webinar, you'll have a better idea of what healthy materials and standards are, have some sort of methodology or understand the process for selecting healthy materials, understanding the opportunities and challenges for manufacturers, testing labs, and specifiers. And then lastly, inspiring more use of healthy materials because they're so important to be using in our schools. Next slide. So what is a healthy material? We could talk about this. We could probably have an entire webinar series, and maybe we will eventually, on healthy materials. But essentially, healthy materials are the ones that reduce chemical exposure to building occupants. And so the EPA estimates that concentrations of certain pollutants can be 2 to 5 times higher inside than outside. And additionally, in 2019, a researcher found that the primary source of VOC emissions in downtown LA wasn't cars, it was emissions from consumer products, and that includes building products being used inside buildings. So when you think about downtown LA smog at rush hour, what comes to mind? You multiply that by 2 to 5, and that can be our indoor environment, which is our schools as well. So it's really, really important that we address these issues. And we can do that through, of course, operations like ventilation systems, but most importantly, we can choose healthier products. Next slide. So here is Raja, and he'll be talking about lab standards and testings and that perspective. We'll make sure his mic is working. We had a little trouble. Can you hear me, Raja?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay.
I tried to change into more
Perfect.
advanced earbuds, but it didn't work. Very well. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I'm the co-founder and lab director of Berkeley Analytical. Berkeley Analytical specializes in indoor air quality and chemical testing for building products. Okay, so for the next slide and for the next few minutes, I'd like to take you through really the process of testing from manufacturing to making that market claim, healthier market claim. So every day I get requests to test building materials according to the CDPH standard. So which materials are to be tested? What is the CDPH standard? Why the CDPH standard? And who are really requesting these tests from the manufacturers, right? So the product that qualify for testing are any products or material used inside the waterproofing envelope membrane for an indoor environment, such as a school, classroom, office, children bedroom, for example, for asthma and allergy, right? And so any materials, if you look around you in the room, you'll see, the walls, any paints and coating that used on the walls can be tested. The gypsum itself can be tested, the insulation behind the wall, the flooring, any floor covering, carpets, resilient flooring, and for the ceiling tiles as well, right? And of course, any wall covering, window covering as well, and doors, right? So these are the materials that can be tested and listed on low-emitting material databases. They can be certified, they can be verified, they can be, the manufacturers can make a market claim on their own through different databases, right? So why the CDPH test? What's so special about the CDPH and how it became the benchmark standard for testing building materials? In around 2000, the state of California needed to build large number of offices in the state, in the capital in Sacramento, and they couldn't really find a healthy test standard that will address chemical emissions from building materials. So they decided that they would write and develop a standard. So they asked all the experts around in the field, and they wrote what they call the California Section 1350. So most people know it as California Section 1350. For the next about 20 years, the standard went through about 3 revisions. And the latest one is version 1.2. This one you can access on the CDPH website. It's transparent, it's available for everybody to use. And what makes it so healthy? What's so special about it? Before the CDPH standard, there was really standards for TVOC and formaldehyde only, and for some other compounds. The Office of Environmental and Health Hazard Assessment in California, they added 35 chemicals to the standard. These are chemicals of concern. And they set limits called CREL limits, non-cancer limits, for the product to be able to emit and not to exceed these limits. So the product is tested for these chemicals, evaluated for these chemicals, and modeled to a classroom and an office and a home. And when modeled, the emissions from these products cannot exceed 1/2 of these, what they call CREL limits, right? So you can see that table in table 4.2 of the standard. It's accessible on the CDPH website. It's 35 chemicals like toluene and formaldehyde as examples. And so why 1/2? The idea is not to allow one product to take up all of the limit, right? And so when commissioners and IH personnel go to the website, to the actual building itself after everything is done, and they do the commissioning, so they can measure, again, they measure these 35 compounds and to make sure that these CREL values have not been exceeded. So that makes the CDPH standard is the benchmark standard. It's been adopted by manufacturers. The next slide, please. And it's been adopted by manufacturers, by different government agencies. It's been adopted by third-party certification programs, by labels, right? And because of these adoption, by default, they moved on to the green building rating system like CHIPS and LEED and WELL and ILFI, and even declare labels require the CDPH test to be on their to be listed on the label. So the standard is also really a complete standard. It requires the manufacturers, they put them under strict timelines on how to sample, the product, how to package it, how to ship it to the laboratory. It requires the laboratory to be ISO 17025 and to use well-known ASTM and EPA standards and ASHRAE standards for ventilation to do the sampling, the chamber testing, the quantitation of these chemicals, and to do actually the modeling to predict what the concentration is going to be inside of a classroom or a home or an office. Next slide, please. And these are some of the attributes that the CDPH has, and these are written inside the CDPH standard. So really a full standard. It's not only for chemistry, but it's also about modeling, and it's transparent. It's available for everybody, and it has to have a chain of custody form. So the chain of custody form has to follow the product from manufacturing to the reporting, and it has to be attached to the report. This way, the laboratory creates confidence for the certification programs and labels, and to the manufacturers that the standard has been followed. Right. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the CDPH, this is a list of different organizations that have adopted Section 1350, the CDPH Section 1350. Again, next slide. You can find the standard published on the CDPH website. There's a lot of pages, and the tables are there, the modeling are there, the timelines are there, and the list of chemicals. Beside the CREL compounds, there are also the chemicals of concern. So the laboratory has to also report any chemicals that are cancer agents or reproductive toxicants, so the manufacturers know what their product is emitting. Next slide. So the CDPH test really is a complete test. It has timeline for the sample requirement. It has requirement for the laboratory to follow, and it has acceptance criteria for the laboratory to follow using the ASHRAE 62.1 for modeling emissions. Why is that very important? Next slide. Right. So you're creating confidence in the marketplace by following this test method and requiring the manufacturer and the certification to follow the standard very tightly. You're leveling the playing field, and you're creating confidence in the marketplace. Next slide. By modeling these chemicals in a schoolroom or an office, right, you're actually predicting exposure, right? Exposure to kids, or exposure to workers. And by allowing manufacturers to know what the chemicals are emitting from the product and reducing these chemicals, you're actually reducing risk. You're reducing the exposure, you're reducing the hazard, you're reducing the risks. So there are three ways of exposure to occupants inside the space. You can dermal, through the skin, hand to mouth, and the one that we're dealing with here is really inhalation. Inhalation of VOCs are available in the air. Right? By reducing all of these chemicals in the air, you're reducing the risk and exposure. Next slide.
Hey, Raja, sorry, we have to move on. Okay. We have to make sure to have time for everyone.
Anyway, so in conclusion, tested products using the CDPH method is a healthier product to be used in schools, offices, and homes. So the last slide is for your entertainment. Many questions quickly confuse VOC content from VOC emissions. VOC content is really regulation. And so for products to be tested, to go to the next step and be tested for emissions, they have to meet these regulations. These are grams per liter in the can versus microgram per meter cube in the air that is available for inhalation. So I'll pass on the baton.
Thank you, Raja. Okay, so Patty, take it away.
Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, go to the first slide, please. So as far as specifying healthy materials and why we choose them, what we normally think is part of or materials are made out of is really just the tip of the iceberg in many cases of what is actually included in a product. And so toxic chemicals, we've found out through a lot of research in our company, are just endemic throughout building products, unfortunately. For example, there was a great study done by Arlene Blum at the Green Science Policy Institute regarding flame retardants in both furniture foam and in infant sleepwear. And they found that the flame retardant actually didn't do that much to retard flames. However, the flame retardant chemicals ended up in the bloodstream of the babies, and they're not healthy chemicals. So that's just one example of why this is so important. So as an architect, it's my responsibility and all architects' responsibility to protect the health, safety, and welfare of building occupants. And we really feel that material health is a really important part of that responsibility. And not only is it important for the occupants of the building that we're focusing on now, teachers and students and administration people, but also from the extraction of the materials that go into a product to manufacturing and transportation, all the way through recycling or end of life. You know, people are being exposed to the chemicals that products are made out of. But as Raja was going into great detail about, which is fantastic, VOC emissions are the most important part, I think, of making sure our interior classroom environments are healthy. And so we really start with things that are touchable. If you haven't done this before, start with the things that you can touch, like carpet, right? And things that you can breathe, porous materials like gypsum board, paint, ceiling tiles. You know, those are the most important things to get healthy versions of, and those products offered by manufacturers that are healthier aren't necessarily more expensive. There are some products that are more expensive that are healthier versions, but for the most part, we found there's not any significant difference. Another aspect of this is owner liability or school district liability, because we've had at least one situation where we renovated a building and a teacher came into the building, into their new classroom, and said, "This building is making me sick," and describe their symptoms. And we were able to show, provide the district with the information that every product that we put on the interior of that building was a low emitting material. And so then that person understood that they had to look elsewhere for why they were getting sick. But as people become more and more aware of, the public becomes more and more aware of these issues, there are liability issues involved, and we want to make sure that school districts have the tools to do the healthy materials, so they don't have to deal with potential lawsuits, for example. And we also want to support manufacturers who offer healthy products. I've seen where some products have been discontinued that are healthier versions because people aren't specifying them. So we need to do everything we can to support our manufacturers. So, next slide. So the way that we approach materials selection at Architectural Nexus is, first of all, not to use materials that we don't need to use. Then we focus on reuse and salvage materials where possible, specifying natural materials. And then when we get to new materials, then we look for healthy materials. Next slide, please. So how do we find these materials? There are several sustainable design databases available on the web that we go to regularly. And at my last slide, I'm going to have a list of some of the more common ones, and more useful ones, I think. We also have a company transparency initiative where if a manufacturer's representative wants to come into our office and do a lunch presentation or contact our architects about their products, they first have to show that they have either an environmental product declaration, a health product declaration, a declare label, or some other means of telling us what the chemicals are that are in the products that they want us to specify. And then, of course, if we can't find the information anywhere else, we go on the manufacturer's website. Through these databases, we go to their websites and we can call the manufacturer. And for example, some of the manufacturers may have a VOC emission certificate from Berkeley Analytical Testing, and yet for some reason they aren't showing it on their website and you don't know about it. So you just really need to call and ask. We also have an internal database that we've developed from our Living Building Challenge, CHIP, and LEAD projects that is of some use in informing our master specifications. I'll mention in a second. Although that information sometimes tends to get out of date, but it's still very useful research that we try to retain as well as possible. Next slide. So how do we incorporate this material? I've been working for the past couple of years on incorporating, showing preference in our specifications to products that have these transparency labels. For the most part, more preference to products that don't have toxic chemicals and that have low volatile organic compound emissions. But then we also reward manufacturers that may still have something in their material that's not super healthy, but at least they're telling us what's in it, which goes a long way further than a lot of manufacturers. We also begin material selection and discussions about healthy materials with our clients early in the design process, incorporate our specialists, our interiors designers, and myself as a material health specialist into our design process at the very beginning of design. And lastly, we also try to advise all of our districts about healthy cleaning products because, you know, there's some advantage, right, to be able to specify and have healthy materials in your school, but then if you come in with a bunch of toxic cleaning products, that doesn't help the situation. So we try to help them understand what options they have in that regard. And then last slide. So we have some links to some of these transparency databases that you'll be able to download when the presentation is available for download. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. All right, handing it over to Gretchen Withers to talk about why manufacturers invest in health, and feel free to do an intro about yourself, Gretchen.
All right. I'm Gretchen Withers, and I work for Oregon Door and Oshkosh Door. We're sister companies, and I'm the sustainable lead for both companies. So I am going to explain what Oregon took a large step to be the most sustainable manufacturer in the door manufacturer in the industry. So next slide, please. And so what we manufacture are architectural wood doors that are used in commercial buildings, schools, hospitals, things like that. Next slide, please. And so in 2015, we made a decision to become strive to be one of the most sustainable and transparent door manufacturers in the industry. Part of the reason is because we feel environmental responsibility is at the heart of our company's philosophy, and we continually strive to be the leader in providing sustainable solution for all opening needs. Next slide, please. And then this is probably my favorite slide of all of the slides I'll be presenting because, well, first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about our company. Our location, we're nestled in the Pacific Northwest. We're located 3 hours south of Portland, Oregon. You can find to specify our products. We're located in CSI Division 8. We're a member of CHIPS, and we're also a member of WDMA. The picture you're seeing in the background is the view from our plant. So if you drive up to our plant, you step out at the back door, you come out of our office. This is our view, and I think it's just gorgeous. I think it says a lot about our company. Next slide, please. And so when we talk about sustainability and transparency, our company's belief is if you're going to be sustainable, to believe in sustainability, you've got to be able to walk the talk. And to do that, you have to be transparent, and you've got to be willing to validate and show your proof in being transparent. Next slide, please. And just a few of our, just a couple of our doors that we offer: particle core, agrifiber, mineral core, structural composite lumber core, acoustical core. And then we also offer a couple of specialty cores, which are lead lined and bullet resistant. Next slide, please. So as far as investing in our future, what Oregon truly believes in, part of being a member of CHIPS, is that we're really investing in our future. So being a member of CHIPS to us is we view sustainability as investing in our future, and that is investing in our children. And you got to think of it this way. After all, our children are the world's most valuable resource and the best hope for the future. Next slide. So just to give you an idea of some of the transparency documents that we've got 19 EPDs. We have 3 declare labels, 6 HPD certifications, recycled certification on almost all our doors, the same with our Green Guard and our Green Guard Gold certification, and then various CHIPS certificates, and then of course, last but not least, our FSC certification. And then when we'll just go through is just a few of our certificates. You'll see on the left-hand side is our CHIP certificate, and then our declare label, and our FSC certificate, and what a recycled certificate looks like. And then our Green Guard and our Green Guard Gold. And I'll stop for a minute on the Green Guard. On Green Guard Gold, this is what Raja was talking about before, because this complies with the CDPH, and that is something very specifically that people will ask for. And then on the left-hand column is our HPD, and then our EPD. Now, in order to be as transparent as possible, partnering is very important to be transparent. So one thing we do rely on is our vendors are a huge partner in this equation. And in order for us to be transparent, they need to be transparent with us so that we can create these healthy material certificates. And then internally also, we're very proud to be a green power partner. And what we do there is we're partnering for the use of renewable electricity, and we're a proud partner with Pacific Power Blue Sky, which supports renewable energy. And then I think this really kind of wraps up our whole sustainability story. Our Oregon team does really work cohesively together internally to create a very environmentally conscious workplace. And I'll use the 3 R's of what I think our core beliefs are, which is reuse, recycle, reduce waste, and preserve our natural resources. And then to bring it down to just another example internally is a number of years ago, we invested in a UV finish line with a water-based stain and a UV top coat. And we reduced our emissions from 80 tons a year down to 2 tons a year. And I think that was huge. So I think that's something to be very proud of as a company. So in specifying Oregon Door, I think you can have confidence when we work with AECs who seek to create sustainable, safe and healthy buildings, that we do really truly try to walk the talk. And I know our distributors, I work with a lot of our distributors, they rely on our expertise when it comes to transparency. For some people, it's kind of a foreign language. And so we're there to help them walk through this to make sure that they're working with their architects and their customers to deliver on transparency. And if you would like further information, our website is at oregondora.com, and I noticed Patty had this in hers too, we've also got a catalog page on Sustainable Minds that lists all our transparency documentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gretchen. All right, last but not least, John Sumlin with Target. If you want to do a little intro, and we'll be speaking about opportunities and challenges for manufacturers. Oh, John, you're muted.
Hey there, John Sumlin, longtime CHIPS member and board member. And I work for Target, which we're a global flooring manufacturer. We make everything from soft surface through the resilient category, and do a lot of work with schools, especially in the K-12 market. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how manufacturers can offer maybe an additional opportunity. Obviously, we need to meet the certifications that Raja mentioned, the levels, the VOC levels, and we have to show that through third-party verified declare labels and also HPDs and EPDs. But what I'd like to talk a little bit about is the commitment sort of at a higher level, maybe a global level. And what that means is that a lot of manufacturers will offer a line of products, or we have these certain products that you can use that are sustainable, or that meet all the certifications, but the balance of their offering may not be there. So what I profess and what Target professes is a holistic approach. And so that is what I recommend you consider when you're looking at product. Make sure you look at the individual product, look at the certifications, but also look at the overall manufacturer and what is their commitment to sustainability. So and say an example of that is do they have greenhouse gas emission standards or goals? Are they what's their carbon footprint? Can you determine where they fit on the carbon scale? We are a cradle to cradle certified product company, and not all our products are cradle to cradle certified, which may be your litmus test, but we test 97% of our materials to the cradle to cradle standard. So what that indicates, and we hope indicates to the marketplace, is that we are a committed manufacturer. We would do 100%, but much of what we make is a recipe. So when you make different types of flooring products, you're using different materials. And so to reach 100% means we would have to stop all our development. And so, offering, this cradle to cradle philosophy, I think is something that I would recommend you look for in a manufacturer. We're an original signator of the UN Global Compact. So we have been attached to that for many years, 10 years, and we look at the UN principles as our guiding principles, and we include that in our corporate sustainability report. So sort of where we fall on diversity and inclusion, poverty, water use, everything that's involved, and we also offer certified products. So I think that's a huge one. So third-party certification, cradle to cradle principles. Corporate stewardship, I just talked about that a little bit. There's a new organization out there called EcoVadis, and they do, they're the world's largest, most trusted provider of business sustainability ratings, creating a global network of more than 90,000 rated companies. And Target has been, I guess you call it, awarded, or has joined that organization at the advanced level, top 1% in our industry category, highest level of maturity. So those type of things with these goals I've mentioned, show you a commitment level. So the challenges that we see are these singular lines. I've got, these 6 products will allow you to get, CHIPS credit. They meet CHIPS. Well, what about the balance of your line? Narrow commitments. We're committed to, this particular plant, but our other plants, we have not gotten there yet. So look at the entire organization and look for that level of commitment. Quality. I think quality can't be emphasized enough, because if a product does not last, you have to replace it. And so that churn that occurs is one of the problems that we have. It's sort of the take, make, and dispose. You need really a circular philosophy, and durability fits into that. So I would say that's something that I hear a lot about, and is a challenge within our industry. Products are being swapped out way too much. We see a lot of manufacturers offering, in my category, flooring category, carbon neutral products. Well, that's fantastic. We applaud that. And oftentimes those are achieved with carbon offsets. But if the product is being made in Asia and shipped into the States, into a school, and you have access to a product that's manufactured here, and you can assess the embodied carbon, meaning you look at the transportation, it's a whole different story. So that I would encourage you to look at and look at it more holistically within the flooring category specifically. So the dynamics that we're talking about here, obviously you heard from a lab, you've heard from an architect, and you've heard from two manufacturers, is how we interact together. And what I would encourage you to do is to hire a professional architect, and they can help you navigate this. But make sure you're verifying that these are third-party certified claims. They're not manufacturer claims. And that's important because some of the product declarations out there are self-proclaimed. And so make sure you make that designation. And I recommend you create a relationship with the manufacturer, so you know what you're getting, their overall commitments that I've talked about, and then you can, when you need materials for your own use, my category often for just a small renovation, no architect or general contractor involved, you have a trusted partner. So that's kind of where I'd like to wrap up, and I think we're going to kind of do a little bit of a panel style here. These are some of our designations. You can see the UN global goals there, that in the cradle to cradle certified, EcoVadis I mentioned. So those are just some things to do that. 99% of the products that we manufacture and distribute are meet all the indoor air quality goals that we've talked about today. So we really don't produce items that are going to cause issues within the built environment. So that's where I'll wrap and hand back to you, Natalie, and we can take some questions, or we can bring up some topics.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but I've got a few that can start us off, and then maybe that'll propel some more. Let's see. So this was one thing we talked about, but first I wanted to ask you, John, just to elaborate a little bit on third-party versus self-declared labels. For someone who's totally new to looking at healthy materials, what are ways that you can, how do you know if something's third-party verified?
That's a great question. Thank you, Natalie. So you have to look at the documentation. Most of our portfolios will refer to which group we're using to third-party certify. So you can look at, in our case, it's portfolios. We would identify the third-party certifier on our portfolios. We also do it on our specifications. We use Ecomedes. We also do Sustainable Minds. So you would go to those resources, and each product has that, the third-party certification listed there. So you just have to ask. It's very different, and I think you can find out a lot when you ask that question. If it's, if you get sort of silence and there's not a third-party certifier, all it means is it just hasn't been done. But I think we all have to be skeptical. So I would recommend that you dig into that deeper and require third-party certification.
Great, that's super helpful. And I believe you can go to those specific sites themselves. So if you see that something has a health product declaration, you can go to HPD Collaborative and look them up. So you can go to and I think Patty actually touched on that. We did have one question in the chat, it looks like, but let's see. Sorry, let me go up here. Yeah, as another architect on the call, I'd be curious to know if Patty a form or a list they ask all manufacturers to complete prior to arranging for a product introduction to an office for consideration?
We have a product transparency initiative letter that we send to them and request certain, documentation. Am I able to share my screen by any chance?
Yes, I can go ahead and give you the screen share option. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. Hang on, let me, oh, shoot. I am not in my, I can't do it. I'm sorry. So what we do is we ask for third-party product declarations, such as declare products, declare label at HBD, a cradle certification, and VOC emissions testing, as well as specification language from the reps that include their transparency information. I'm sorry I can't share the letter, but basically that's the gist of it.
Great, thank you.
Patty, not to put you on the spot, but maybe that's something we could share on the news on our CHIPS newsletter if you're willing, so that other folks
Sure.
can access it. Great.
You bet.
Okay, we're getting some more questions in here. So another is maybe for Raja, testing or certifications of products for small companies may be cost prohibitive and could mean that other products from larger manufacturers are being selected, and maybe these products aren't local. Are there any resources to help these smaller companies in North America to ensure their products can be tested and celebrated when they are healthy?
Yes, that's actually a very important question. The databases, it really depends what you're looking for. For emissions, there are databases like the CHIPS database and the ClearChem database and other databases. They allow self-claim. The ISO 14001 process, it's in one of my slides, you can do self-declaration. You have to follow, the 1401 process, and you need to document that. So yes, you can do a first-party claim, second-party claim. You don't have to go to a third-party certification programs.
Okay, great.
Wait, sorry, Natalie, just Roger, quickly as a follow-up on that one, I'm wondering also to that question, are there any grants or universities that can also help testing of smaller companies from a financial standpoint or a capacity and knowledge standpoint?
I'm not aware of that. For the state of California, there's the PP program, the preferred product program, list-based. So you can actually, you can also pass it on to upstream to your suppliers. So some testing can go to share it with other people involved in the process of making that final product. Yeah. But I'm not aware of an agency that fund these testing or certification to that matter. Yeah.
Another question in the chat is I think this is a really interesting question. Who drives the transition to healthy materials? School boards, parents, government, industry? And that's maybe a question for anyone. I have some thoughts too.
Well, yeah, John, I'll chime in. I just had a thought as well that, parents are obviously, very, very important, but obviously that's not holistic across the entire, at least in the public school arena, active parents, but parents are a big, big driver in schools. School boards are ultimately responsible. I think, that they're culpable to what happens in their schools. And so I think they have a need to do that. But the thing is, in CHIPS, obviously you have, rating systems, but it is, it's the right thing to do. And there are regulations. And so I'll step back and let you, I think it was maybe Gretchen that spoke that could answer that better than I could, Patty.
Yeah, Patty, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting. I think that architects and designers should be the drivers. I mean, it's our responsibility.
And I'd like to say, I think it's everyone. I think it takes all parts. I think that industry is really important too. The AIA Materials Pledge coming out with different standards and buckets, and designers committing to that, letter to manufacturers, letter to building owners. I think it takes everyone. It takes everyone to vote for this.
So yeah, so if I will, so the for the CHIPS programs, for the CHIPS rating system, originally, really, that was a bond measure by the state of California. That's how it was initiated. So to remodel and build new schools, the state raised funds. There was about, $10 billion. It's quite a bit of money. So they were giving incentives to schools. If they choose healthier materials in their schools, they will get money back for choosing these products. So that's how the CHIPS program really started. So government agencies and states can actually drive the healthier material wagon.
Can I add real quick to that? Timur, it's a really, really good question, and everyone has had a different take on it, and they're all right. From the big high level perspective, we've seen everything from the state of California start to initiate codes, and they're starting to look at embodied carbon, and that could be a requirement to start as a voluntary one. We've seen folks like LEED, WELL, CHIPS all growing in their market, all requiring more materials. We've seen leaders of school districts starting to specify either third-party criteria. We've seen states like Massachusetts and Rhode Island that provide funding for schools as long as those schools meet a third-party criteria, therefore meeting healthy materials. So it can really be a bit of everything. My personal opinion is, we have about 100 folks in this webinar now, and we'll get more in the recording. Almost every student at the middle school and high school has a larger audience through social media right now. And if they find out that there can be a healthier product put in at cost in their schools that gives them a healthier environment, we are all going to get shamed publicly in social media for that. And that is just a matter of time. So I think to Patty's point, it is up to designers. It is up to all of us to push these healthier products.
Okay, maybe I'll move on to another question. Do we have time? So what if a material is considered safe with very low VOCs, but after being exposed continuously to sunshine or used in a spatial environment like a closed swimming pool, the chemical property of the material may change? Maybe this is a good one for Raja, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there are limitations. The CDPH, by all means, is not perfect. It doesn't really deal with semi-volatile phthalates, and it doesn't really talk about reactivity, UV reactivity in a swimming pool, chlorine, or any other organics. So these are really different standards. These have to do with toxic air contaminant regulations and the use of these chemicals outdoor or even in indoor swimming pools. So these are different standards.
Okay, a couple more questions here. Let's see. We have clients now more regularly who want to know the location of where something is made and only want a USA made product. Is this fair? Many are nervous.
I mean, I'll jump in because we have products that are sourced all over the world. I think it's a very fair question. And I think sometimes it's veiled. And so, I kind of got into that, that you have a relationship with a supplier, manufacturer, that, you need transparency there, and you don't need to, because sometimes products will be packaged in the US. So they come in bulk and they package them. And the Buy America label, which came from the federal government, has been watered down to allow that to occur. So I think it's an honest discussion. If you have an opportunity to use a product that's made in, somewhere in the US or on the west side or the east side of the US, I think that's a fair question, and it is better, in my opinion, to do that. So I think that is a totally fair question. It may limit some of your opportunities, like linoleum is not made in the US, it's only made in Europe. So that would be, you could potentially limit a wonderful product that happens to be a carbon negative product, because they're made, only 2 manufacturers are made within Europe. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good thing to look at because of supply chain and embodied carbon and being able to really trace the impacts all down the supply chain. It's a little easier when it's local, right?
Can
Patty,
I
were you
add to
gonna say
that?
something? Yeah.
I think it's really important and legitimate. We want to support our local and regional manufacturers, and the less transportation costs, like you said, the less carbon impact, the less pollution. So I think that's a very fair request. I would say good luck on several products. I know that, for example, Living Building Challenge looks at the final manufacturing location. So, there may be components that are made in various different places, but the final place that these are assembled or manufactured then becomes where it's, quote, made, which I think is fair at this point in time. But yeah, I think it's very important.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, and I do want to say CHIPS is going to be putting together a webinar series that will dive really a lot deeper into materials, into all these different aspects, from health to embodied carbon, supply chain, which plays into this purchasing local. And so I just want to remind everyone that we should be having a series that will go in more depth. If you're interested, make sure to visit our website to see updates on future webinars and things. But it looks like we're about out of time.
It's like it, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much.
Thank you, panelists. Great job.
Thanks,
Yeah,
thanks very
thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend. Yes.
Take care. Bye.